overuse of violence in video games has been a reoccurring controversy for years now. It seems that whenever a horrible atrocity, such as a mass shooting, is committed by a certain demographic, the first question many seem to ask is, did they play video games? Were they tipped over the edge by GTA? The standard rebuttal from most gamers is that video games help relieve stress, and if anything, help prevent violent behavior rather than cause it. The worst-case scenario gamers are ever willing to admit to is that video games play on deep-seated primal urges that lie dormant in all of us, and that violent people who play video games are going to act out in malicious ways, whether they game or not. While I do find myself agreeing with these sentiments, I can't help but question if we don't sound like another group who blames the person rather than the object. Guns rights activists. Now, I'm not saying that we should try to go out and regulate video games, because I do believe the industry does a good job of self-SRB. I just wonder if we should question our logic with a little more scrutiny. I mean, I don't know, maybe someone who's mentally deranged and mad at the world shouldn't be playing video games like Fallout. I think deep down we all agree with things like this, but we get scared of admitting it because we fear what such discussions might lead to. Almost like a kid who hides the truth from their parents because they'd rather not deal with the problem. I don't think it's the place of government or the industry to be telling people who can and can't buy video games, but I do think if we are more open to discussions about the impact video games can have on mental health, that maybe people who are taking powerful psychotropic medication won't find themselves engrossed in a virtual shooting spree whilst thinking it has no impact on their state of mind. I personally don't know how I feel about all this, and find myself not really wanting to jump on board with this idea, but deep down, I know it's true, and at some level, I think all gamers do. I just think we don't really know how to approach this issue, because we fear that admitting to it will lead to external forces hindering creative expression in what many perceive as a burgeoning art form. Which brings me to my second point. How will video games ever be accepted as a true art form like cinema, when most people who don't play tons of games tend to see only the blood and gore? Have we become so protective of our violence that we overuse it without really thinking about what we're doing? Because in many ways, I feel that overusing violence as a game mechanic is sort of the easy way out, because if you think about it, it's really hard to make fun game mechanics that can be used to propel a story forward that aren't inherently based off the standard action movie model. I feel that in some ways, turning to shooting and violence has created a sort of glass ceiling for large-scale game productions, and keeps us from realizing the medium's full potential. It's not that I think video games shouldn't have violence, because I truly believe that depictions of violence are necessary for any great art form. I just think that we overuse it, and that we do so because developers are afraid of taking risks and breaking away from their arcade roots. Now bear with me, because I know this is going to sound crazy, but when you get down to it, even the most advanced video games are nothing more than glorified reskins of Space Invaders with better graphics. What I mean by that is that so many video games, no matter how great they are, revolve around the basic principle of you shooting an enemy and them shooting back. And yeah, I know that's kind of a generalization, but in the vast majority of plot-driven AAA titles, you have to hurt countless numbers of people before you reach the next part of the story, oftentimes to the detriment of the game. We've all been playing a game before and been like, there's no way this building would have that many guards. It seems we can't figure out how to make something that is cinematic, has a compelling story, and sells millions of copies while not using violence to get the player from point A to point B in the game's plot. I think now that CGI is getting so realistic, developers should start taking more risks and make games that have more in common with books, movies, and paintings than slot machines, Tetris, and Mario. And yes, I know I'm being dramatic, but that's because I think video games can be so much more than they are now. Well, I hope I haven't made you guys too mad, and I hope I've raised some points that get you guys thinking about the role of violence in video games, without giving everyone the impression that I hate violence in video games. I just think that if we really push ourselves as developers, we can make video games that are better than movies, better than books, and even better than paintings. We just haven't gotten there yet, and we have a long way to go. So I challenge you all to think outside the box in your future endeavors, and try to push what video games are and stand for in our society.